Welcome to the Armada MilComms Podcast with your host, Tom Withington at the controls. In the wake of Russia's Ukraine invasion on 24th of February, thousands of SATCOM terminals were shipped to Ukrainian forces. Elon Musk dispatched terminals to provide wideband internet coverage via his Starlink satellite constellation. Starlink's actions mirrored those of Viasat, which had provided terminals before the invasion. Both Starlink and Viasat experienced Russian cyber attacks, but these were quickly rectified with software updates. What are the possible consequences of providing commercial wideband internet coverage to troops at the tactical edge? I'm discussing this subject today with my guest, Adam Bartosiewicz, Vice President of WB Group. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Good afternoon, Thomas. I'm happy to be your guest.
Thank you so much. So WB Group has been involved in Ukraine since 2014. Could you talk a little about that?
We have supplied at least 20 birds, drones, UAVs in this past 8 years. All of them were used predominantly for targeting artillery, and they were in the hands of special forces and the intelligence services. So very demanding customer, as you can guess. And we had the reports from these days that more than 700 different targets were engaged and destroyed using the information provided by fly UAVs. So it was heavy fighting then. Then for several years, the situation changed to a little bit more quiet. However, the war was always there, and there were people killed constantly. But the world somehow managed to forgot this the situation. And the events of 24th February this year was a great awakening to everybody, probably including Ukrainians. This situation was something that nobody really believed. However, it happened. So that's a lesson for all of us, that things that we don't believe sometimes happen.
Now, I know that you and I have talked about the provision of the SATCOM terminals in the past. What were your initial thoughts when you heard about the supply of these terminals to the Ukrainian forces?
I have to come back a little bit to these experiences of our 8 years. It was the presence of Russian electronic warfare almost constant. We have been in contact with fly operators through the time, and we have been witnessing their struggles with constant jamming of GPS, the data links, the targeting of operator due to geolocation of radio frequency emissions. And we were expecting these problems really to be much of a bigger challenge when Russia employs its full force. I think that Starlink is a game changer, to say the least. First of all, it's not something that Russia can easily play with. As you have mentioned, there was some cyber attack. A little is known what's the nature of the cyber attack, whether it was some form of jamming or just some tricks on the network level, network layers of the system. However, what turned out is that Starlink was resistant to all these games that Russian force was prepared to play. And it provides Ukrainian forces with undisturbed access to the World Wide Web. And it is, I think, a game-changing factor for Ukrainian forces. Of course, it makes their effort in targeting different targets and controlling artillery and providing reconnaissance that is gathered in places to be available instantly to military planners. And therefore, it makes their artillery and missile attacks very accurate and timely. It is public knowledge that, for example, fly operators are using Starlink terminals to connect their ground terminals with, I should say, the cloud. And therefore, whatever they see can be instantly available to headquarters. We have been even asked by the artillery officers in Ukraine to hook Starlink terminals to command vehicles, so to allow the closure of the decision loop at the level of battery commanders. It's absolutely amazing how it's achieved in such a short time, this level of understanding what that level of connectivity offers the commanders and the artillery as such. So this is something that made efforts of the artillery and the Ukrainian army very effective. So in absence of this heavy force of multiple guns that the Russians can afford to target at Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian is using their artillery wisely. Their attacks are targeted, and therefore they are able to demolish the supplies, the storage of ammunition and command centers. So therefore they can use limited resources they have in a most effective way. And I believe that connectivity plays enormous role in these achievements. It should be treated as achievements of the Ukrainian army.
Looking towards the future, and perhaps looking slightly beyond the Ukrainian theatre of operations at this point, to round off, how do you think the provision of similar support could affect fighting at the tactical edge in future wars, for example?
Our lessons from the Ukrainian war that we draw is that, first of all, you need to limit your electromagnetic emissions. It is not only allowing you to achieve your mission objectives, but it, in some cases, makes you able to survive. So limiting your emissions is important. Starlink is very much along the same line because it makes limited emissions that are directed to be invisible from standout. And therefore, it's difficult to spot those sources of emission. So it's important. It's absolutely the same philosophy that stands behind our silent network that is one of the outcomes of our presence in Ukraine. But there is also another aspect of this. And it is also visible in how Ukrainian army is coordinating their artillery effort. It's mostly done through the special software that is called RTGIS. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's something that was developed by a community of software developers in Ukraine. And it's pretty much using all these available resources that sensors can provide, all the imagery that flows into the cloud. And it allows distribution of this information to the people of interest, to the effectors, in a very smooth and effective way. So it's another example of commercially developed software that is absolutely, I would say, a groundbreaking development. I think that the similarity to the so-called Assault Tactical Kit, or TAC, the effort of US Army, that is very similar in concept. It's developed under the guidance of the Army. However, lots of companies and developers contribute their software work, their add-ons to the application that can be really launched on a smartphone. So it's another example that the community of developers can contribute to the applications that the Army is using. To say that this is an example of a crowd storming the kingdom of defense industrial base, I think it's a very accurate depiction of this situation. So it's also very important to note this development, because it's another example of application of commercially developed solutions that are effective, not only in terms of military application, but they are mostly effective cost-wise. I can say that systems of the level of complexity of, I would say, ABCS, for example, the American large-scale C2 application that run billions of dollars, at some point, they can be offset by the effort of tens of hundreds, maybe thousands of developers that contribute their work to something that is very useful to the Army. Another phenomenon that stands behind Starlink is even maybe more important than artillery and anything. It's that connectivity allows thousands of people to contribute their content to platforms like Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, you name it. And that content is providing the Ukrainian government and agencies responsible for formulating the information warfare of Ukrainian government. This couldn't be achieved without connectivity that Starlink provides. And this is something that contributes vastly to the possibility and the availability of resources that Ukrainian army draws from donations of foreign governments supported by the public. And I believe that this is also enormous influence of Starlink, because Ukrainian army is receiving those guns and those ammunition from all over the world. Maybe if not for all other reasons, because all this content produced at the low level provides proofs how effective these resources, this ammunition and these weapons are used by the Ukrainian army. This is also very important. Connectivity is a precondition to the effectiveness of this so-called cognitive warfare that Ukrainian army is also running.
Absolutely fascinating. As I say, I'm very grateful once again for you joining us. And as I say, let's talk again soon and have you back. Don't forget, there's more military communications news and analysis at armadainternational.com. But for now, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much for listening.